Yeah, so this is innerVIVID, where we're all over the theme of tomorrow like white on rice, which is a phrase I'm just trying out. Hit me up in my DMs for reactions. If I had DMs. My name is Jonathan Sargent, and I used to only wear those free socks you got given on international flights back in the day. Last step, we talked about the ideas of fate and destiny. Up against those is the concept of free will. You know, the idea that where life heads up is totally up to us and no one else. That's scary, maybe? If that is the case, how does a dope like me make decisions about what to do next?
How do you make big decisions in your life?
I actually am better at making big decisions than I am little decisions. So I just kind of go with my gut and go, yeah, that's what I'll do.
I think I like to make decisions based on thinking things through, but also deeply reflecting within myself and but also talking to people. So it's a bit of both inward and outward sort of thought for me.
When I'm making big decisions, I guess I draw on the wisdom that's around me, the wisdom and experience of friends and leaders. Always at the end of the day it comes down to, for me, what is the relationship I need to look for in this, that I need to care for in this.
Sleepless nights, lots of coffee and talking over with people that I think are a little bit wise.
That question could be a video all on its own. Even if you put your faith in the idea of fate or destiny, you still have to decide things for yourself, right? You can't be totally passive, unless you have a really nice couch. Okay, so free will, take charge. But some of us do wonder this.
Free will sounds good, but can life get in the way of that?
I think it is a brilliant understanding that I am free to do whatever it is I want to do. But the reality is that there are constraints, and some of those constraints are internal and some of those are external. I think sometimes we are unaware that we might think when we're looking at our phones that we're scrolling at just the things that we want to look at, unaware that there's a whole lot of algorithms that are only presenting things to us that the algorithms think are things that we would like to see. We are very fortunate to live in Australia where there is much greater freedom to make choices than many. I think if you have education, generally you have more choices than those that don't have education. If you have money, you generally have more opportunities and choices than those who don't have money. But that said, some of those people who don't have much money and don't have much education live very happy and fulfilled lives. So I think it's a complex kind of piece, but it would be naive to think that we are not manipulated in some ways or guided in some ways. Adverts, whether they come online or they're in billboards, consciously and unconsciously shape what it is we aspire to buy or to have, or where we want to go for holidays. So I think constantly the freedom piece, even though it's an ideal, is impacted upon by advertising if we're looking at purchasing things in the consumer environment, or even what we aspire to do or where to be.
Yes, life gets in the way. I'd like to think I have free will, but that's absolutely conditioned by when I was born, where I was born, my gender, my parents, my ethnicity, all kinds of things. There are a whole lot of choices in life that have never been available to me simply because I don't know about them, or because there are other reasons why I can't make those choices. I'm free to make some choices, and I think there's a sense of autonomy and identity that comes from being able to make some critical choices in life, and that's really important, and I would defend people's ability to make some choices in life. But as far as complete autonomy or complete free will goes, no, I don't think so. I don't know what's coming around the corner. So I might be making choices today that dictate the future in a way that I've got no idea about too. Would I have made that choice if I'd known everything? I don't think so. So was it a free will? Maybe a little bit, not really. No, I don't think so.
I'd look back on my own life and I think I've made some shocking choices in the past, and I wish I could blame the consequences of those choices on other people. And, you know, in seriousness, I've caused harm to myself and to other people because of the choices that I've made. Yeah, that's hard to live with, that reality. Yet, here I am with the ability to make my own decisions that influence my future and the future of other people around me, and particularly people that I love and care about. So that's a heavy responsibility when you actually sit down and think about it and take it seriously.
Free will, I love that phrase because I think it gives us the sense that as human beings we do have agency, and I really do think that as humans we do have agency in the moment about how we respond to whatever life throws at us, which is very different from saying that we have agency over what happens to us. Sometimes things do happen to us about which we have no control, but I think it's empowering, and it can give us hope to know that we can actually make choices about how we respond to things that matter, whether they're really big things or whether they're simply moment by moment things, perhaps encountering someone who annoys us. How do we respond to that? We have agency around how we respond. We do have free will in that sense.
Well, we have a mixture of free will and determinism, I think.
Determinism can be said to be the doctrine that all events, including human action, are ultimately determined by causes regarded as external to the will. Some philosophers have taken determinism to imply that individual human beings have no free will and cannot be held morally responsible for their actions.
And one of the things I am really trying to dismantle in my life and the way I look at life are binaries. So our culture has been really primed to think in binaries. So we think about free will and determinism as if they're two separate things, and yet I think there's a mixture of the two. We have free will in that we have the capacity to make choices, but there's a whole lot of our life that is also being, like there's a backdrop to it, there's a culture, there's a way of understanding stuff that tends to influence the way we make decisions. There are constraints on us, particularly if we're resource poor. So we do have a sphere in which we can operate, which we can exercise our free will, and we do make choices, and it's really important to know what that sphere is, at the same time as understanding that we're actually part of a much larger system, and the system actually has its set of constraints which can be really helpful. That's why we tend to live in peace, but also stop us from doing things.
So free will is only free to the extent in which things are possible and to which our imagination might extend what might seem impossible now to what might be possible in the future. There's also things that we will not choose to do because of our family background, our culture, our religious beliefs that will have shaped us in some way that will restrict the choices we make. Some of our choices will be restricted by how we are physically, what gender we are, what height we are, that kind of thing.
The idea of absolute free will, in the sense of a complete transparency or mastery over one's decisions and actions, I think doesn't exist. I think that we are all products of our various environments, and that we're sort of pretty radically determined by our various environments. Whether we think of those environments as the early caregiving environments that we all experienced as infants and children, and how those influenced us and shaped our very personalities and desires in indelible ways, or we think about larger social, political, economic environments that we act in as adults. I think all of these constrain us and direct us and shape us in ways that we typically aren't even aware of. So I don't really think the notion of kind of free will in any absolute sense exists. Now, I think there are kind of margins of freedom in each of these environments, but what it means to access that freedom or activate that freedom is never straightforward. So for instance, like I don't think the freedom to choose what color iPhone I get is not really freedom. It's actually a constrained decision in an environment that teaches us to feel free when we're buying what we want. But I don't think that's actually freedom. I actually think it's sort of the opposite of freedom. Different spiritual traditions sometimes talk about freedom, not so much in terms of an abstract ability to choose this or that, but in terms of like concrete capabilities. So the freedom for creativity, the freedom for generosity, the freedom to love. And so it's less about freedom from external constraint and freedom for some kind of generative activity. And I think that's a better understanding of freedom than some sort of abstract ability to choose.
We like to think that we have the freedom to choose anything, that we can do whatever we want and be whatever we want. The reality is that we can't. I talk to my kids about this a lot, particularly when they were learning to drive. I said, you have the freedom to drive this vehicle wherever you would like to, but you're not going to, and you really shouldn't, because the person who's driving towards you is expecting you and trusting and believes that you will drive on the left-hand side of the road. And so when I make my choices, yes, I have the choice to do anything, but because I am part of the human race, because I don't live my life alone, often I make choices not based on just what I want, but what's good for the people around me. But also there are other people who might block my choices from time to time. And so the idea that we have free will and we can choose anything is deeply embedded in me, but with the caveat that says, no, there are some things that I restrict myself from doing out of love and compassion and care for other people. And there are some things that I am restricted from doing because of what other people are placing on me to keep me, them, other people safe and contained.
Thanks for that, everyone. People seem pretty strong on the angle that, yes, there is free will, but only to the extent that the cultures we live in allow it. And to me, that becomes the most interesting part of the question. What things do get in the way of me actually choosing my path in life? Because I wonder if sometimes there might even be ways of thinking that become ingrained without deserving that and become too precious to critique, like worshipping flags or national days about failed military campaigns, or systems that make us feel unhappy if we don't have the latest phone. Anyway, don't get me started. The bottom line though, what about you? What do you think can get in the way of your exercise of free will? What you actually want to do? Some of those things might actually be good, of course. Road rules and other regulations that protect us and each other, yeah, they're a good idea, I'm pretty sure. But what else?